held a news conference late this afternoon. They say they're investigating the attempted murder of 22-year-old Matthew Shepard. The sheriff says deputies found the man badly beaten and unconscious, tied to a fence last night.
The brutal attack left Matthew Shepard in a coma, prompting
the bicyclist who found him said he first thought Mr. Shepard was a scarecrow.
In jail now, charged with the crime, 21-year-old Russell Henderson and Aaron McKinney, kidnapping.
And the victim, Matthew Shepard, is in very critical condition at this hour at Hoover Valley Hospital.
The arraignment took place on Friday around lunchtime. And more details about the case had come out, like the fact that the perpetrators themselves were kids. Kids. Local kids that everyone who's from around here has some relationship to. So then a judge comes in and does a reading of the facts.
The defendants, Aaron James McKinney, Russell Arthur Henderson, met Matthew Shepard at the Fireside Bar. And after Mr. Shepard confided he was gay, the subjects deceived Mr. Shepard into leaving with them in their vehicle to a remote area. En route to said location, Mr. Shepard was struck in the head with a pistol. And upon arrival at said area, both subjects tied their victim to a buck fence, robbed him, tortured him, and continued to beat and terrorize him.
When I got to the fence, I seen what appeared to be a young man, 13, 14 years of age, because he was so tiny laying there and he was bound to the bottom of the pole.
What did you do?
I did the best I could. He was covered in dry blood all over his head, and the only place that there wasn't any blood was what appeared to be where he had been crying down his face. You know, he did not look normal. I could tell that he had a very harsh head wound.
You expect these kinds of injuries from somebody crashing down a hill in a car at 80 miles an hour. You expect to see gross injuries from something like that, this horrendous, terrible thing. But you don't expect to see someone doing this to another person.
Both defendants were later contacted by officers from the Laramie Police Department who observed inside the cab of their pickup a credit card and a pair of black patent leather shoes belonging to the victim, Matthew Shepard.
The thing that shocked me is it was a pristine crime scene.
How do you mean?
The tire tracks, the impressions that the tire made, they were just perfect because of the sandy soil there. And we found a carpet fragment from inside the truck. And that will always shock me until this day. In southeastern Wyoming, the wind here is so strong that you usually never find something like that at an exterior crime scene.
His hands were thumbs out, what we call the cuffing position. That's how we handcuff people. He was tied with a real thin white rope, and it was wound around the bottom of the pole, about 4 inches up off the ground. His shoes were missing. He was tied extremely tight, so I used my boot knife and I tried to slip it in there between the rope and his wrist. I had to be extremely careful so as not to harm Matthew any further.
I was yelling at him at the top of my lungs, you know, hey, wake up, something, just trying to get anything out of him. He didn't move, he didn't flinch, he didn't anything.
We rolled him over onto his left side, and when we did that, he stopped breathing, so I immediately got him back on his back. And that was just enough of an adjustment. It gave me just enough room for me to slip my knife in there and to cut him free. And then Rob drove the ambulance to Ivinson Hospital's emergency room.
Once we saw Matthew, it was very obvious that his care was beyond our capabilities. Phoned the neurosurgeon over in Poudre Valley, and Matthew was on his way in an hour and 15 minutes, I think.
A couple of days later, they showed me a picture of Matthew. I would have never recognized him.
Said defendants left the victim tied to the fence, begging for his life.
Well, certainly you'd like to think that this is somebody from out of town who's come through and beaten up somebody. But when you're seeing someone who's been beaten repeatedly by someone in our own town, now that certainly offends us. And that's a good word. It offends us.
The defendants will remain in the custody of the Albany County Sheriff's Department till dates can be set for their trials.
It was huge. Yeah, it was hers. And we are talking hundreds of reporters, which makes a huge dent in this town's population.
Laramie, Wyoming, often called the gem city of the plains, is now at the eye of the storm. People would like to think that what happened to Matthew Shepard is the exception to the
There are reporters everywhere. News trucks everywhere in town, everywhere on campus, and we are not used to that type of attention.
Aaron McKinney and his friend Russell Henderson came from the poor side of town. This small city that bills itself as Wyoming's hometown is wrestling with its attitudes towards gay men. It's a tough business, as Matt Shepard knew, and as all his friends know, to be gay in cowboy country.
And to get that kind of exposure under such tragic circumstances, under circumstances that we hadn't even wrapped our own heads and hearts around.